Muesli bars and protein bars that you buy from the store are typically full of sugar and packed full of preservatives. And the worst part of all, they are so expensive. Just these ones here cost me almost $30. And you know, when you look at the ingredients, they're not actually that fancy. Peanuts, almonds, cashews, sunflower, pepitas, golden syrup, brown rice syrup, cinnamon. You can buy all of those ingredients at the shop, so why not make them at home? So today, that is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to make homemade muesli bars from scratch that taste better, are more affordable, are entirely customizable, and most importantly, are way better for you. So let's get straight into how to do that. Why did I do this? Now, first up, the ingredients. As I said before, this is an entirely customizable recipe. There's a few things you probably don't want to chop and change, but most of this you can swap out for whatever you like. Now, most protein muesli bars contain some nuts. So today we've got some peanuts, some cashews, and some sesame seeds. For a bit of sweetness and a bit of chew, we've got some pitted dates. We've also got some dried cranberries as well. We've got some rolled oats here. Now, this is going to be somewhat of a glue, a really important part of this recipe here, so I wouldn't skip out on these. Now, I also really like to include popcorn in my protein bars. I think texturally fantastic. I would definitely recommend trying that. I've got some chia seeds here. These are also a really important part of the recipe and really super good for you, packed full of omega-3 fatty acids. Now, I've tried this recipe before without any sweetener, and I really do think you need some form of sugar in it. Today I'm using honey, but there are some alternatives that you definitely can use here. You can use maple syrup, malt syrup, and if you really don't want to include any extra sugar in your protein bars, you can certainly use an artificial sweetener as well. For a bit more body and chew, and this is going to somewhat act as the glue, I'm going to be using peanut butter here, a really important ingredient as well. You can't really skip out on that. You can certainly swap it for another type of nut butter, cashew butter, almond butter, etc. But definitely be including this one in your list here. Now, it is really hard for this to be a protein bar without including some form of protein powder. I would highly recommend using a plant protein that is flavorless, but if all you have is whey protein or a flavored protein, that is absolutely fine. Generally, they contain artificial sweeteners, so if you do have something like this, dial back on the honey so it's not too sweet. The first thing we'll need is a pan. In this case, I'm just using a square pan. Its sides are about 20 centimeters long. The first step, we're going to line this with baking paper. Done. We'll then take a bowl and we're going to put all of the dry ingredients in there. Now, we don't want big, massive chunks. So if anything is too large, we just need to chop it down. So I've got some peanuts that are whole. I've got cashews that are whole. I'm going to chop them down a bit because I don't want them to be too big. I mean, of course, if you want that, you definitely can. You can do whatever you want. I've got about 1/3 of a cup of cashews and 1/3 of a cup of chopped peanuts. 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds. 20 grams of popcorn. So with the dates, we're chopping these up pretty fine. I don't want massive chunks of date in my muesli or protein bar, but again, if that's what you want, go ahead. You can do whatever you'd like. So I've got about 5 dates into the bowl there. A handful of dried cranberries. I'll put them in the bowl as well. And to that, I've got 1 cup of rolled oats. And lastly, I've got 1/2 cup of protein powder here. Straight into the bowl. The last thing we'll add to the bowl are the chia seeds. Now, you can add these whole, absolutely, no problems there. They'll be a nice textural addition. I really like to grind these up into a powder, just using a little grinder here. It actually really helps bind everything together, and it really activates the chia seeds. They actually become a lot more available to your body to absorb all of the good stuff in here, of which there's lots. So, into a grinder, and I'm just gonna grind them up for just a moment. You can see that is now a super fine powder, which is exactly what we're after. As I said, this will bind everything together. Once this touches any form of liquid, it swells up and becomes a kind of gel. We'll add that into the bowl. And the last but quite strange ingredient that we'll do, we'll actually add a pinch of salt to this. That will add a surprisingly powerful difference there. It's gonna make things taste way better. So I'd highly recommend including that. We'll take a stirry stick and make sure everything is really nice and incorporated there. I am so good at making a mess. That's all nice and incorporated now. Once that's done, set that aside. The next step is to make our glue, and we're actually going to do this in a saucepan. It's only got the two ingredients, the peanut butter and the sweetener. In this case, we're using honey. So on a really gentle heat, that would help. So we'll get quite a small saucepan and put that on quite a gentle heat. To that, we'll add our peanut butter and we'll also add the honey. And we'll heat this really gently and just make sure that everything gets really nicely combined. The reason we do this is the peanut butter and the honey are too viscous to pour through our mixture at the moment. It just won't work. So we need to heat this up to loosen everything up a bit, and then we can finally pour that over our mixture there. I'm also going to add 2 tablespoons of water to the mix. This again will help loosen everything up and will help allow that mixture spread throughout all of the dry ingredients. We do not want this to burn, so we are just going to heat that up until it's quite warm. As soon as it's there, kill the heat. So we've got our hot mixture and our dry mixture. All we're going to do is take that hot mixture and pour it into our dry mixture. We want to make sure that we get it all. We actually need to work quite quickly here because once that hot mixture hits the dry mixture, it's going to start cooling and start solidifying. So get your spatula and stir that all in. If the mixture is looking a bit dry, which mine is, add a tablespoon or 2 of water to help bring everything together. Once you can see it's starting to come together, make sure it's not too hot by just testing it with your finger. And if it's not, you can start mixing with your hands. This just makes the job way easier to get everything all nicely mixed together. You can see now it's starting to come together because you can form a solid ball with it. Once everything's really nicely mixed together, we can take that mix and put it into the baking tray. So we simply take it out and put it in to that baking tray there. We want to make sure we get it all. Take our messy hand and press that in. This is a key step here. We want to get this really nice and compacted and evenly spread throughout so that the muesli bars are all the same thickness when we go to cut these up later. That's about as good as I can get with my hand. After that, you can take something flat and just make sure it's all pressed down nice and even. We're going to take this and put this in the fridge for at least 20 minutes to let this chill down, ideally overnight, and it will really start to solidify up. While the protein bars are chilling, there's another thing that we can do to take them to the next level. This is entirely optional. You do not need to do this at all, but I think it takes these bars from a level 9 to a level 10. So I really think that you should. Now we are going to coat these in chocolate, and not just any chocolate. We're trying to keep these bars healthy. So we will take at least 70% cocoa dark chocolate, and we're going to melt that down and use that to coat these bars. To do this, we're going to get a pot of water on the boil, and then we'll take a bowl and put that on top. Now I've got 200 grams of chocolate here. We absolutely don't need that much. And I'm gonna take this block here and just break it up into the bowl. And you'll see that chocolate starts melting really quite quickly. So this technique here is called a double boil, a really useful technique for melting chocolate. Now this step here is entirely optional as well. Once that chocolate is melted, it's only just melted, we don't want to push it too far, we can take some unmelted chocolate and put that in there. And what this is hopefully going to achieve, without too much effort, is it's going to temper the chocolate. It will hopefully realign all of those crystalline structures of the chocolate so that when it cools down, it has a nice snap to it. Now this doesn't always work. Tempering chocolate is quite an art, and I don't think it's worth it for protein bars in this case, but we're just going to stir that chocolate in so that it melts down, and then we'll leave it to the side. So we've got our molten chocolate, and we have our muesli bar, which is now nice and chilled, and you'll see when we take it out of the mold, well, it's nice and hard now. I'm going to cut this up into nice portions. I'm going to cut it in half, and then I'm going to cut them into muesli bar sized portions. To keep this nice and tidy, I've got a cooling rack and some baking paper. Rip that off. We'll put our cooling tray there, and we can take our tool that we used before, slide it under one of these muesli bars, and honestly, these look really, really good. And I'm just going to take it, dip it in the chocolate there, turn it over, and slide that onto the drip tray. I'm not gonna lie, this is quite a messy job. Once we've topped our protein bars with chocolate, the next thing that we can do is put a topping on. Now it's really important we get to these quite soon. These are chilled bars and that chocolate is going to set. And so whatever topping we put on will just fall off. So make sure you get to this while the chocolate is still molten. For the toppings, I'm keeping this simple. You can use whatever you want. I've got some coconut here, some goji berries, some crushed peanuts, and some chia seeds. All that is left to do is to top those off. Now we are done. The final thing that we would do is put these in the fridge just to make sure that chocolate sets. Now I do not want to wait for that, so I'm going to give one of these a go right away. They're quite soft because they haven't fully set yet, so they should go in the fridge. I just can't wait for that. Oh, that chocolate. So good. 10 out of 10. So as I said, these, whoa. So as I said, these need to go in the fridge to set fully. But these are such a good treat. They taste fantastic, they're good for you, packed full of fiber and packed full of protein as well. And we know every single ingredient in there. There's not a single preservative in there. And they were pretty cheap to make, and we've just made one batch here. Now, because there are no preservatives in here, they should be kept in the fridge. They will, in theory, last for 2 weeks, but I promise you, they won't last for 2 weeks. You will eat them all before then. If you do want to make these in advance, these freeze fantastically. They'll freeze almost indefinitely. So that's everything for today. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, happy cooking. There's chocolate everywhere.